your patience. Thank you for sharing. And then we're talking about titles 1, 2, and 3, and how we prepare our own rights, how we advocate for ourselves, for our own rights under the ADA. There are things we could do. We have to make sure that we request accommodations, that we have documentation of that. We made a phone call, but it's hard to prove a phone call, like what's discussed on it, so make sure to do things like email, send letters, write back and forth, have text messages that are more concrete proof that you requested interpreting services, and that under ADA it is my right to have an in-person interpreter, BRI, or whatever accommodation, tactile, braille, whatever your preferred communication method is, have a documentation that you requested that specific service. If that accommodation is declined, then they just tell you no. So the next step that you would do is talk to a supervisor, talk to someone who's in a position of power, and tell them that you were denied accommodation. And they can fix it internally, that's fantastic. Then the situation is resolved, but if it doesn't, then like the next step would be to talk to an attorney and talk about what choices you have. So like the first one is you have to file something internally with a supervisor, with someone in a position of power, and then you can go to a higher level, DOJ, EEOC, whatever you need to do. And then the last action you should take would be to see an attorney. So it's like those are what you should do before you even sit down with an attorney, because you want to try to fix it before you get like the law involved, because a lawyer and a case is a lot of work, so there should be steps before you get to that point. So Title 4 is about telecommunications. What does that even mean, telecommunications? It's access to phone calls, customer service, 800 numbers who are helplines, things like that, anything that you can call. They have to be accessible, like either through TTYs, that was a long time ago, or even if you're calling a VP service, 711. Some companies still use that. They'll hear an interpreter's voice and they will hang up, but they can't do that. That would fall under Title 4 situation. So they have to be accessible. They have to accept that kind of service, whether it's TTY, BRI, BRS. It's like the same kind of concept as like Social Security offices. You have like the number for services, and then it's either writing to a caption or waiting for an interpreter on screen. So that kind of thing is like a straight phone number that you can call. That would be like the VP, where an interpreter is on screen and then they, place the call to a direct phone number. So Title 4, kind of short, but there is 5 things to talk about. There is like setting up your right under the ADA, and like whether it applies to me, because like you don't want to get it. Title 5 is about anything else. So like if it's the BP itself, or Title 5 will protect you from retaliation. So if a worker files a discriminatory complaint and then they fire you or they demote you, they can't retaliate in a way that punishes you. So like you'll notice like, oh, my coworker has an accommodation, and they'll tell to their boss like, oh, wait a minute, I want, like, but they can't just. We have to advocate for ourselves without being afraid, and that's what Title 5 gives us the power to do. So if an employee asks for an interpreter and they kind of say, oh, okay, but then they demote you, they give you less hours, they pay you less, they can't retaliate in that kind of way. that would be negligence, that they can't, because that would fall under Title V. They have to provide services for you that are reasonable accommodations, and you have to be able to do that without being scared of consequences. Also part of Title V includes that some laws do overlap. And the ADA is on a federal level, meaning every state has to follow the ADA. But some states have their own like state level laws that they've established that maybe add additional support. So you can file, and then on a federal and state level, it just kind of depends on what's the higher power. So meaning you don't have to pick between the ADA or a state level law. You are protected by both depending on what state you reside in. So like a state level would provide maybe more support than the ADA, depending. For example, there's Section 504, the Rehabilitation Act, that is added support here in California that kind of supports ADA ideologically. And then there's ID, which is school services here in California. There's a lot of struggle in schools with discrimination, plus access to accommodations in general, and that would all fall under IDEA. There's the state civil rights laws that sometimes in California, for example, the laws are here to protect you, and they're kind of a little bit strict, a little bit stronger than the ADA language is. There's also the Roof Act, which has some overlapping tenets that can kind of overlap with the ADA or kind of cover what's kind of missing, I would say. There's the Fair Housing Act that protects you against discrimination, so that way everyone has fair access to housing, protects you for rent and unit availability. But like that's to make sure that someone, also the California Disabled Persons Act that also overlaps with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So for example, you have a child with a disability at school and the school is not providing an appropriate, reasonable accommodation. This is what you should do. So it's an overlapping law. Well, technically 3 overlapping laws. You're covered by the ADA for discriminatory actions. There's Section 504, which demands access, and then IDEA for special education services. So you have all 3 of those backing you to make sure your child has the rights that they deserve. And there's a lot of other laws that kind of help each other or kind of stronger, more cemented than the ADA. There's a lot of research out there saying that you should do in your state in order to give yourself the best accessibility that you need. So another example is a deaf employee. Let me clarify, this is in California. It's a deaf worker who's going to a training, but there's no interpreting service. And so there's no interpreter for training. Which law can you apply to this kind of situation? Again, there's an overlap. There's the ADA Title I, employment services, but also the California Fair Employment and Housing Act. So 2 of those will provide you support and advocacy that you have like kind of this proof like, hey, this is the laws that you have to follow. We have federal and state level. Sometimes the state law will provide stronger support than the ADA, so just keep that in mind. And then kind of like the last bit is some other things to keep in mind. If something happens on a state agency level and it's negligence and it's about services for a group of people and it happens again and again and again and you file multiple complaints and it all just kind of gets pushed under the rug, you can definitely sue the state. You can. Meaning, like, you have to go, you're not suing like a specific person, you're like suing a group or like the department or the state. Like, it's the system that needs to change or a policy that needs to change. So like that will cause that kind of systematic change to happen. accommodation in the design. Meaning they can't just build it and then later, oh wait, there's no elevators? Okay, well let me pay to add one or whatever. It has to be within the initial design when they're building it from now on. For outdoor wilderness park recreational areas, there's a lot of people in the general public who use them, so there needs to be accommodation already within it, but like you have to worry about like destruction of property, so it's kind of, you have to preserve what's already there, like the land that's there, so that kind of falls under it. So it's anything that's kind of considered a wilderness area, or that could be seen as like just a recreational area. That all has to be accessible to people with mobility issues. Okay.
Okay, so I want to ask your knowledge and see what you've learned from today. Take a little bit of a pulse of that. We're making sure we provide interpreter access. Can you repeat that again, and I'll copy some? We want to make sure that we have interpreter access for communication purposes. Anybody else who would like to earn? Oh, yes. There are 5 titles. To the wall. Somebody said, me, you want something to say? I missed a question. So I said, I'm wanting to test your knowledge from what you've learned today. Oh, there was so much information that you provided that I'm a little behind to bother me. So I'm going to repeat this. So I was going to ask you a question. There's so much information that you provided. Things that I need to know about here, like GLAD, about peers. That would be all glad I have a question about that. So can I ask that question? Okay, come here. Come here. We were talking. I'll take care of it for you. There's somebody else who also has the issue, but we're going to address it. We're going to have somebody up here in commissary. So who's going to answer? When you get ready to answer, you'll stand in the space there. Okay, you can have the interpreter copy sign and I'll just respond to the question. So from the audience, I have a question about 911. She lives here. She's been here for like 24 years, about 24 years. They're on the property. She's experienced with 911. She's never gotten a 911 habit, having an interpreter here. During the day, yes, but at nighttime, no, I've never had an interpreter here at night. But for me, last Friday, it was during the day. I was 911, a person came to me and there was no interpreter, and I said, okay, you know, about GLAD, or they didn't know about GLAD, so I'm wondering, you keep talking about 911 here, but who's involved with educating and supporting that? So I don't know how things run here at GLAD. I'm just asking about, is it you, or does each agency have to facilitate themselves, or what happens? Okay, so it was 911. They should have somebody come and explain about interpreting services for those people that live here on the property, glad about 911 services. She's been here for 24 years, and nobody's ever explained about the accessibility component of because for safety reasons, the doors are closed and locked, and to get out, you know, if we need to have an emergency, what would we do? Do we know what to do? Does somebody have a key? How does security get in? How do we fix this? Okay, so I can't give an accurate answer to you right now, appropriate, but everybody, all the residents on the third floor need to go to the director and ask for a meeting with Patty to sit and talk about how to resolve this and approach the issues and questions that you have. That's a good first step. It's just at night from the audience, it's not during the day. Excuse me, I'm going to add something as well. So I understand that you have some concerns about communication access in regards to 911 coming after hours, and that's something that we can address. If you approach us, then we can assist with contacting the right department and ADA coordinator, and now that I know who you are, we can make that accommodation. We can get into the system and make those changes. However, if you have other concerns about the building and the safety here, would be something else that you would address with the director directly to improve your building safety overnight. That's a separate issue. Am I able to make that clear? So if during the day you contact us and you answer, there's somebody at the front or FaceTime or text me, look for the 911 fire or anybody responding that way. But at nighttime, who do we contact? Okay. So, just really shocked to see that some of this is going on. What if somebody breaks in at night? Yes. I want to give you a little bit more information on what we're talking about here, an explanation. First of all, it's really important to have good information. I want to encourage you to really assert yourself and ask to have a meeting with the ADA compliance officer in the city of Los Angeles. It's a very big office, very big department, but they always emphasize, did the person file a complaint first? And if they haven't filed, then I can't help you. So I'm encouraging you to file a complaint if it's having to do with the fire or emergency service. What would we say? The fire department is under the LA Fire Department, look at that here for Los Angeles, City of Los Angeles, that you would file a complaint with them. And then once you're done, if you don't hear or receive any resolution, then move on to the compliance office, and they would send their own investigator to go in and check and investigate that. But you just need to file on any issue or anything to do with Title II, whether it's the state or the federal. Again, it's those that receive federal funding are beholden to the law that way. There's a question online. Question says, if my son, typically I go with my son, go in, I bring my own interpreter to go in. Do they need to pay for the interpreter, or who pays for the interpreter? Okay, again, so if this is a public school, then it falls under Title II. They need to comply with providing accommodations, whether it's an individual education plan, IEP meeting, whether it's a student-teacher parent conference, whether it's teacher-parent or back to school night, all of those are required to be accessible. So in general, schools, public schools, if there's an event there, if I purchase a ticket or my son has a ticket, then you need to have the interpreter there. And who charges or who pays for the interpreter? Well, it depends on what kind of event that it is. Somebody's saying that it's general, I paid for admission, and so I'm wondering, yes, but this is including, we're not talking about funerals, that was a separate issue, but these public events like this at a public facility. So let me know if you want to expand a little bit more. I'm happy to have a deeper conversation on that. So under Title 2 and 3, can I then make a request for CDI as well? So I get the interpreter plus the CDI, the certified deaf interpreter? And I can ask for both of those accommodations? Does that fall under that for Title 2 and Title 3? The answer is yes. We're going to add a little bit more information to that. So let's take a couple steps back. This is a question from the comments. If my son is going to an event, let's say for Comic-Con, okay? Would I bring my own interpreter, or they're going to charge me the cost of admission for the interpreter? That could happen because it's access. You got to look at the facility or location. Are they providing the accommodation? It's important that they have, like on their website, they must say that they've got ADA accommodations, looking for what their policies and procedures are. You have to provide advance notice. Sometimes you can do this at the last minute. If I'm bringing my own interpreter, it's possible they could be charged for admission, or you can negotiate that with that entity. Can I have the interpreter come in free because it's for my accessibility? You were just asking about CPI, having both a hearing interpreter and a certified deaf interpreter. Yeah, so if what's really important is to look at this from an effective communication lens. If I have one interpreter who's an ASL interpreter, that's not enough. It's not effective for me to gainfully participate or effectively participate. I would prefer to have somebody that is at my level. Then the ADA does not set that standard that everybody has to have just in ASL interpreters. It's going to be up to individual preferences, and those vary. What's really important is to note that in the law, the language says does not say certified, it says qualified interpreter. So a lot of people say, oh, you gotta have a certified interpreter, but the law says qualified interpreter. So who determines qualification? That's up to you. So you're gonna have one interpreter, and if you're saying that's not qualified, it doesn't work for you, you need different communication needs, and you and I will have different communication needs. And you'll say, by law, this is not enough, I need to have the effective communication vis-a-vis the team of the hearing and the deaf interpreter, and that needs to be approved and provided to you. But what if, like, on the screen or the caption or the text was real small? Can they have that, broad? Can they have that? But what if, like, also like a VRI? A lot of people complain about VRI, and I just agree. That one time that I went to the hospital and was looking at the VRI, and the screen was just small, and I couldn't see the interpreter, and it wasn't effective. And sometimes they didn't understand me. They brought a CDI. So the doctor, the lawyer, asked me about all this stuff, and I said, no, I hadn't said anything. It was the interpreter's fault. They said something I didn't say to the VRI, the screen was too small, and I said, it's got to be bigger, and there needs to be a person there. And I understand the policy, but why did they just not bring the interpreter in the first place? I didn't want VRI. Nobody asked me. This is conflicting with what I wanted. I didn't say anything. So what do we do? What do I do about that? Well, thank you for sharing. Typically places have VRI ready, so it's on-demand service. Some people don't like the quality. It's important that you say, this is not effective for me. This does not work. It does not work. It's not effective for me. It does not accommodate my needs. Well, they've said something off the point. I didn't even say anything. They were already saying something that I didn't say. And sometimes the interpreters don't understand me, and they bring us CDI. I don't understand what's going on. It's all we do. So does that mean that you have a preference for a CDI? What's your preference? Both the team or? I don't know. The VRI, the screen is just too small. It's just really small. I'd rather have a larger screen, and I want a real person. That's just better. It's just better. I can't do it this way. Why do they force that? Okay, so you're accurate. You must tell the people that the VRI format is not effective for me. It's not effective for both of us. And if they've written down or taken notes as part of the chart that that's wrong, then you can make a request to have a meeting or discussion to have this redone and reschedule whatever your appointment is with an appropriate accommodation that meets your needs. You must communicate. You have to tell them and advocate for yourself. You can't just say, okay, and then, oh, I didn't really understand what was going on. You have to say, this is not effective, this is not working for me, and so we're now confused because this is not effective communication. It may have to be postponed until they can bring in an interpreter, and if they try to force payment or that kind of issue, you say no. If you have to file a complaint, you do that, and we'll provide advocacy. But if you don't do that for yourself, we will help you get through the process. But it needs to be resolved, and we can provide advocacy in that way. What about Title IV? She's talking about Title IV and telecommunication. That's part of the closed captioning. That's part of that, right? Right? So under Title IV, that, yes, for public service announcements, and that does count in terms of Title IV. Title IV for last minute emergency awareness, emergency broadcast system, emergency news, or an emergency alert. All that has to be in an open caption form. But many times they don't show the captioning. So is that something I can file a complaint on? What if I can't see the captioning? Can I file about that? What if like it's breaking news? Like what if I like it on caption? Again, you can file with the Department of Justice and also with the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, who's responsible for all technology and media. Those are the different departments in the federal government that would work with this so that you would say, I'm not getting captioning, and this is not meeting the needs, and you file with those two agencies. Some people are not comfortable watching, reading the captions. Is it possible to like interpreters in the window? What about this? Getting interpreters in the window. Are you saying for breaking news? Oh, for any program, like a movie or anything. I'm not sure you'll have to check with that, but some companies do provide. I know that the government is providing the person in the window, interpreter window. But in general, we'll check again. We'll double check to see about that. And so let me add the HBO Max with the shows, movies. They just add deaf actors that are signing on the bottom right corner in the window, which is really cool. Like Minecraft, last show, The Pit. It's a new show they started doing. That was a show that had interpreters or signing in the window, and that is considered communication access for those that are not understanding captioning or not comfortable in that format. They can see it in their native language or natural language. Another question for that? Do any changes to the law? Has any changes to the law happened that we need to know? Any updates or changes? 2008 was the last one with the Amendments Act, the Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act. There were additional protections and clarifications from the original law that was passed in 1990. just recently, the city of Los Angeles has not had a compliance officer for a year and a half. And so we've had some people apply, but that's not something that's up, so maybe we're gonna have some changes. But one person who knows, the person that's handling all the complaints currently, they're working towards improving services. It's worth having this, so like if you have, no interpreters overnight, or something, you just have to file a complaint, keep filing complaints until you get a resolution. There's some kind of change, or change the policy, and the way the system works. CPP says, the law is stronger than ADA captioning, I don't understand that. Well, it depends on the situation. Some state laws provide additional support, or the ADA is broad. I don't understand the stronger. Well, so let me back up a little bit. So which one are you saying? Title II and Title III, looking at that. So with that kind of law, it's specific to employment, location, and it's almost very similar to the ADA, but for a specific state like California, the ADA is very broad on a federal level. We can add additional requirements on the state level to make adjustments within the state of California, or other states that don't have, they need, and they can add additional protections, and we can do that. That's a different topic. That's another presentation about the law itself. Anything else to add? I was trying to ask why the civil rights law under California, why does that rank over the Americans with Disabilities Act? So I think it makes it stronger to add official supports. It doesn't mean that one beats the other, but they both provide, and in tandem to each other, are more stronger protections than if you look at just using or applying the ADA and the California law, which then makes your complaint that much stronger because it now has the benefit of both of the laws. So in general, the apartments upstairs are independent like any other apartment complex in the neighborhood. The apartments there, and people that live in the apartments, it's the same thing upstairs. So there's the management, there's the office, and there's a person that calls 911. There's emergency people that come, you know, and have to deal with emergency. You have to call the manager, but there's nothing that happens, and they don't do anything because you have to find the apartment number, it could be 313, and then they have to open it and see what's going on in the apartment and break or take the person out. So you said that maybe at night there's no interpreter, there's no communication, but it's really important, I think, for the health first, think about this and then take people out, and then we can process and make requests for additional interpreter services. I'm talking about during the day, during the daytime, it's the same thing. I have an office here, and the apartment is going on there, and they call 911. I didn't know about that until something happened, and someone's taken away, and they told me, oh, something happened. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know. So that's a common experience. But in terms of like seeing the nurse, it's different. And if you have a deaf person living in a nursing place, it's like serious, and you need to have access, and you need to have interpreting services provided, all that has to be prepared and set up in advance. So if they have to be brought to the hospital, that's more about that issue. No, I'm just saying in general. I'm just saying in general. Apartments all over, just in general. That's how they operate in your own apartment. You know, the fireman comes and tries to communicate with you, and he's not we need an interpreter like that. Stuff is going to be on hold while they're trying to just deal with whatever the health issue is, the concern, the emergency concern is. You have to make sure that that's good. If somebody came to me, that's not my responsibility. It should be 911. Whoever the emergency services, like the fireman, they take an ambulance, or they come like, what about? I tell them I need an interpreter, and 911, and I tell them I need the interpreter. And I call we are here to wrap up. We're gonna wrap up, and I'll share some resources with you. Here's PowerPoint. You can see the ADA.gov is access to the U.S. Department of Justice and Civil Rights Division. You can also contact the National Association of the Deaf, NAD. They're a deaf advocacy agency, and they are very networked and very connected at the federal level. Also check in with the long-term information and guidance training online with the Americans with Disabilities Act of the National Network. There's other resources there. But the last one, if you need more assistance or guidance resources, please call GLAD. You can make an appointment with an advocate. We can take care of that. Thank you, the interpreter. All right, thank you so much. Have a good evening and a good weekend, and stay safe.